Dear Indian friends, greeting from the Italian Embassy Cultural Center. As you might know, this year marks the 500th anniversary of the great Renaissance painter Raphael Sanzio. We have had to cancel the activities we had planned to commemorate him owing to the ongoing pandemic. It would be wrong to miss the opportunity to celebrate one of the biggest figures in Italian and international art history. And so we are happy to share with you this webinar on the life and works of the great master, as well as the virtual tour of his artworks currently on display at the major exhibition at the Scuderia del Quirinale in Rome, which brings together numerous artworks from many different museums. All of these in collaboration with Bell'Italia 88, an organization comprising of a group of art historians that has been active in Rome for more than 20 years. I give now the floor to Caterina for the presentation of Raphael. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome to everybody. My name is Caterina Brazzi Castracane. I am an historian and I am here to share with you some pearls about the short life of one of the most important painters of our history, Raphael Sanzio. Let me share with you my screen and let me start with the first point. Raphael was not just an artist, but he was a man that the other around him called master. Master means that he was one of the most important artists of that time, a man who was able to change the history of art. This is one of the reasons why in this year we are celebrating the anniversary of his death. And we are doing it with a great exhibition organized in the Scuderia del Quirinale, one of the most popular museums in Rome. A great exhibition dedicated to the genius, to emphasize the grace and the power of his drawings and paintings. Actually, we have to say that despite of his early death, Raphael was enormously productive. And this is another reason why we celebrate him as a great painter. And together with Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, he forms the great trinity of that period that we called Renaissance. Renaissance means rebirth and is a period in history of art that we posed during the 16th century. Everything that we know about Raphael's life is written in the masterpiece of Giorgio Vasari, Le vite degli artisti, Life of Artists. And Vasari told us that the short life of Raphael naturally falls into three different phases, and every phase is related with one particular zone of Italy. As you can see in this map that shows us which was the political situation in Italy at the end of the 15th century, we can find three different areas where we can post the works of Raphael. The first area is Urbino and Perugia. The second one is Siena and Firenze. And the third one is Rome. That was at that time the city of the Pope. We have to start with Urbino. That is the city where Raphael was born in 1483. If you Google on the web Urbino, you could find and discover that is an UNESCO heritage and is also a small city. Notice because it's an university city and is also famous for its history. And the history of the city is linked with the figure of the Duke Federico da Montefeltro, who organized at the end of the 15th century a cultural cult around him. He was a man of arts and also was a man who had the ability to attract to his court a lot of men of outstanding talents. Three of them are Donato Bramante, Piero della Francesca, and Leon Battista Alberti. And we talk later about Donato Bramante because he will be one of the architects of the new St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, but he will be also the man who will invite Raphael to come to Rome to work for the Pope. In Urbino at that time, there was another man. His name is Giovanni Santi, and he was the father of Raphael. According to Vasari, he was a painter, but he was a painter of no great merits or talents. But, however, he was a great man of culture. And so he introduced his son to the world of art and also to the world of the humanistic philosophy that was so important in that period. Raphael was a precocious and talented boy, and in a drawing of that period we can see how was the idea of a boy who was able to realize something like this in just with 3 or 4 signs, creating a sort of masterpiece just with a pencil. This is the reason why after his father's death in 1494, Raphael chose to change the horizon in front of him. And it's clear that his desire for knowledge was driving him to other destinations where study and spend a lot of time with other artists. The first destination of his life is Perugia. And Perugia is the city where worked a master Perugino that will be the first master of Raphael. The name Perugino is linked with the name of the city, Perugia. Perugino chose Raphael as a pupil, and also as a member of his worship. So they realized together for one important palace in downtown in the city, Collegio del Cambio, the frescoes for the audience room, for the Sala delle Udienze. And Perugino is the basis from who the great artist Raphael moved to be a genius. And we can see exactly this influence in the first masterpiece of Raphael, the Coronation of the Virgin. This is a part of a painting now housed in the Vatican Museum, but was realized for a private chapel, the Oddi Chapel, in the Church of San Francesco. In this masterpiece, you can see exactly the grace and the power, the line and the feelings of the figures in front of us. Look to the Holy Virgin, look to the angel. You can feel their feelings and their thoughts, and also you can let you understand which were the feelings of the angel and of all the orchestral scene that you can find at the back. Perugino had realized before one fresco for the Sistine Chapel, and this is one of the most important bases of the history of art, the giving of the keys. In this fresco, you can find exactly the right relation between architecture, perspective, and figures. The first line is displayed with Christ, the keys, and St. Peter in the center, and they are linked with the door of the temple, a modern temple, different from the other that are two different kind of triumph arch, realized looking to the antiquity, and all the scene is realized with a great opening to the landscape. The same effect you could find in another masterpiece of Perugino, The Marriage of the Virgin, where you can realize that there is a link between the Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the architecture on the back. You can see there is a sort of line from the head of the Christ to the door, and this door opening to the sky is something of the most painful representation of faith and divine in the history of art. From this scheme, from this pattern, Raphael realized 3 years later another painting. And you can find the difference in the architecture. The temple is changed, but remains the door inside the line. But also you can feel that the figures are less rigidly related with the architecture, and they are in their movement, in their position, more human than the others. This is the first point of the revolution of Raphael. And starting from this point, he will realize three small, great paintings. The first of them is called Three Graces. In this painting, you can find all the grace that he used from the past, from the antiquity, and the peculiar study about the female nudity. And you can see a modernity that is shown in the face and also in the relation between the three girls. The second masterpiece, houses in Paris, is dedicated to the figure of Saint Michael, the saint who destroy demons and devils as a night. And in this kind of imaging, you can feel a sort of narrative paintings with the idea of let us understand the history that defined the history of the church. The history where Saint Michael is an hero for the Catholic Church, and he is the man who was able to destroy the bad world, to transform the world in the best place to live. This thematic is also present in the third masterpiece, The Vision of Night, a romantic painting where we can see a night that is sleeping, and during his sleeping appear around him two figures to help him to fight for the church and also for religion too, with a book and with a flower that help him to realize that peaceful world that we see in the ideal vision of the church. After those three masterpieces, Raphael was ready to discover the great cities of art. First of all, Siena, where he arrived in 1502 at the invitation of another pupil of Perugino, Pinturicchio, and where he realized with him the cartoons for the frescoes in the Piccolomini libraries. But after Siena, he was ready to arrive in Florence, that was at that time the real heart of Renaissance. In Florence, he arrived at the end of the 1504, and in that city he had the possibility and the opportunity to study the great master of the past. First of all, Leonardo, with this annunciation, perfect vision of the unity of the past, the Gothic architecture or pattern for the painting, and the palace with different kind of figures where the humanity of the sitters were changing the world of art. Second masterpiece that Raphael found in Florence is the David, that yesterday, but also now, is one of the icon of the beauty in the art, and is a perfect statue linked with the idea of the beauty of the ancient and the modern one. In the third phases, he discovered the Madonnas of Masaccio. And Masaccio is important because he's an artist who is posed with the, one part of his art linked with the Gothic and one part linked to the modernity. What I'm saying is that if you look to his Madonna, you find that the position is more rigidly defined from other, but the face and the eyes or the smile of the baby is one of the first symbol to that represent changing art that speak a new language. All of these information are basically the first stars from Raphael work, and you realize quickly three different kind of Madonna. The first one is the Madonna of Goldfinch, where you can find the sweetness and the completely different representation of the landscape after the body of her. The scene is a simple representation of a mother with two children, the young Jesus and son John the Baptist, and the child are playing with a goldfinch that is a symbol of what we'll see later, the Passion of Christ. But in that moment they are just a child, and they are playing, as you can imagine that two little boy can do also today in a garden or in a park. The same real modern feeling is remarkable in the other Madonna, the Madonna of the Meadow, where the landscape changed in the for the colors and for the sky, but in the babies are playing as we have seen before, in this case also with one symbol of the Passion of Christ. But I have to say it again, is the normality of those humans that could be the most important aspect that we notice in Raphael paintings. The same view is represented in the Belle Jardinière, a wonderful Louvre masterpiece, where I would like that you look to the different kind of nature plants and tree that you can find around the body and the dress of the Madonna. And also in the last Madonna of this first part of Raphael's life, you can see that he was trying to transform the normally ideas of the Madonna, essentially a painting create for a private and personal devotion, in something that we could really call masterpiece. After this experience, he left Florence to arrive in Rome. Rome that is the heart of Christianity, and Rome that was the city of the Pope. In this case, by the end of 1508, Pope Julius II, in this case portrayed by Raphael at the end of 1512, was the man who called him to realize his private apartment and private library. 4 different rooms that Raphael painted inside the Vatican Palace in Rome. We can see in the map that the rooms that we call in Italian Stanze di Raffaello are 4. And you can see that are Sala di Costantino, Stanza di Elodoro, Stanza della Segnatura, and Stanza dell'Incendio di Borgo. We will pose our attention on 3 of the room, starting with the room of Segnatura, maybe the most important room in the history of art. In that room, Raphael realized a second series of frescoes. 2 of them posed on the largest wall in the room. The first one is called La Disputa, and is the fresco that you got in front. And you can see that is a great wall painted with a different area. The higher part is completely related with the eternal divine representation of God and Christ. You find God, Christ, the Holy Virgin, and St. John the Baptist. Around them, a lot of prophets and apostles that are talking about the divine aspects of life. The link between the divine part of the word and the humanity is posed basically on 4 books that are the representation of the word of Christ, the Vangeli. And behind those books, you can understand the main aspects of the theological representation of the word. This is the reason why in the lower part of the fresco you can find different philosophers and theologians that are talking about the mystery of faith and the mystery of religion. In this representation that has a pyramidal form, because on the top you can find God, and in the other part on the left and on the right side you can find like arms, the people and the humanity. You find a complicated representation of a concession, and is a real representation of great meet, but also a war of different point of view. Behind all the philosophers, you can recognize the profile of Dante Alighieri that you can see here, because Dante, who had written the great masterpiece of the Commedia, was at that time considered a theologist, has and in the same rule of other men of his time. In the wall on the other part of the room, you find another frescoes dedicated to the school of Athens, the most important philosophical school in the history. And this fresco that is maybe the masterpiece of Raphael is completely related in the to the aim to discover another world that was represented together from the past, the present, and the future. What I'm saying is that the fresco is composed on three different parts. The first part is this huge architecture where you can find different kind of symbol like the arch, the sky, and a great allegory of what was the idea of the temple of antiquities. But this is also representation of a huge cathedral, basically painted from the design of Donato Bramante for the new Basilica di San Pietro, for the new St. Peter's Basilica. So this is the reason why we can talk about this architecture has a great representation of a fusion between the past and the present. The second point, and I have to say the central point of the fresco, is represented of those two men, Plato and Aristotle, two of the most important philosophers in the history. They are the culminating point of a representation where every single man is there to emphasize one aspect of the rationalism and of the power of the mind. Around Plato and Aristotle, in the lower part, you can see also the self-portrait of Raphael that you can see here in the lower part of the fresco. We are talking about him, and you can see exactly here with his face, and is posed near another important theologist of the time, Zoroaster. The second room is dedicated to peculiar mystery of the history of the church, and we will discover that in that room that we call the Stanza di Elodoro, the great masterpiece is represented on one fresco that called the Liberation of St. Peter. In this case, we have to discover that Raphael started with complicated architectural plane in front of him, because this part that you can see in front of you is not a part that Raphael painted, but is a window, a real window inside the room. So Raphael should build narrative paintings that you can read from the left to the right to discover the beauty and the great lighting effect that you can see in all the three parts of the frescoes. The scene starts on the left and shows us the moment when St. Peter is liberated from the prison by an angel, and look to the last part of the fresco, where you can see St. Peter and the angel hand in hand that are coming out from the space, and this is the real representation of the triumph of faith and church. I was talking about three separate lighting effects that you can see in three moments. The first moment is the light of the torch that the soldier takes in his hand. The second one is the moonlight upon the Golgotha, the place where Christ, and in this case St. Peter, were found the death. And the last light is related with the angel and is a divine representation of the light. The light is also the important theme of the third room, the room dedicated to the fire in Borgo. Borgo is a neighborhood near the Vatican Palace, and this room was realized by scholars and pupils of Raphael, but this part that you can see in front of you was realized by Raphael. You can see that the fresco is, in this case, divided in two parts. The first part is related with this hero. He is Aeneas with his father Anchises, and they are coming from Troy. They are entering in a new place where they will build another city. This city will be called Rome. This is one of the myths of the foundation of the city. The second part is linked with this body, because you can feel and understand that the body in front of you is a sort of great anatomical study, and is the proof that Raphael looked to Michelangelo, that at the same time had finished the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, where he put in frescoes the great ability to draw the human body. After the death of the Pope Julius II, Raphael continued to work with the next Pope, Leo X, who was the son of Lorenzo dei Medici, Lorenzo il Magnifico. And he realized for him this portrait, where we can see the Pope in an informal kind of representation with a book, as we can understand that he was a man of a huge culture, and around him there are two cardinals who will be the sign of his power. But Raphael also realized 10 cartoons for the tapestry that the Pope put to hang on the wall of the Sistine Chapel. The tapestry that were woven in Brussels by the worship of Van Helst, one of the most important worship in this sector of that period, are now houses in the Vatican Museum in the Pinacoteca. But the cartoons are housed, as you can see, in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. For the exhibition of the Scuderia del Quirinale, now in Rome, they decided to show us one tapestry, and this tapestry is dedicated to the sacrifice of Lystra. After the pontifical commission, Raphael became the Prince of Art, and he spent the last years of his life working for a private owner as the banker Agostino Chigi, and he realized for him the great loggia of his palace, Villa La Farnesina, but also a man, Raphael, who realized the great portrait of the 16th century. First of all, the portrait of a woman that we are seeing in the rule of Venus. We called this painting La Fornarina, and where you can find exactly the deep magical effect that Raphael realized to emphasize the beauty of her body, posed on a backstage of dark and blue. The other great portrait that we how can I say, that we remember of that time is the portrait of Baldassare Castiglione, the man who was a cultural man but also a friend of Raphael, and a man from who start the new interpretation of the reality of portrait. You can understand the strong intensity of his eyes, and also discover in this unusual position the great experience of Raphael as portraitist. In this case, we can exactly understand what the man is thinking, and which is the ability of the painter to realize and to create a relation between the sitter and the figure and the man or the woman that are in front of the portrait, to understand which was the man they are seeing. The same effect is present in the masterpiece called La Velata, where this kind of language is transformed in a body language. She is wonderful, her beauty is known in all the chronicle books of the time, but in this case she is giving to the painter, but also to us, a a new kind of intimacy that you could read in her right hand. Well, the hand that she is putting on her body, on her heart, to declare and say something important to the man that is in front of her. You know, this is something new for the art. This kind of interpretation of art is what we called modernity. And everything in the history of art of the next centuries started with this point and with those great masterpieces of Raphael. The link between Raphael and the faith is more evident in this representation of the Holy Family, where you find again the figure of the Virgin Mary with two children, and you can notice the ability that we were talking about before, to create a normal situation of relation with the Virgin and the babies. But in this representation of the Holy Family, you can also find the figure of the Father, Saint Joseph, that posed on the back side of the painting, is here to represent the pain and the dolor of what we will see in the future. I mean, the death of Christ and the destiny of the Holy Family to be the icon of suffering. These sweetness and graceful kind of paintings is remarkable also in the Madonna called Sistina, the Sistine Virgin, where you find a baby with a different kind of eyes, as he is seeing in the future which kind of life he will pass through, but also in the epical figures of angels that you can find in the lower part of the painting. The angel that in the next century will become the great icon of pop art. And this is strange, but is interesting because show us how the revolution of Raphael art could really broke every line and horizon to become an eternal form of art. And we are arriving to the finish, the end of our conference, seeing two more masterpieces. The first one is dedicated to Saint John the Baptist and was realized in 1511, and is a representation of the Saint John the Baptist, the boy that you saw in the last masterpiece, but in this case he's boy like a young man. And this representation of the saint is remarkable for the colors. Look to the dark and brown around him, but also for his perfect body. That is a link between the body of Michelangelo and also the body of the history of art that we will see in the next centuries. First of all, the body of man that we will discover in Caravaggio's masterpiece. And the last masterpiece is an unfinished masterpiece, a great painting that he realized in the moment while he dead. And this representation of Christianity is basically divided in two parts. The higher part that is the representation of the transfiguration, the moment when Raphael told to his apostle and show them the divine part of him. The lower part of the representation is linked with the moment when all the sitters discovered that divine part, and is interested to notice that all the figures are realized with different kind of expression. And in this case, Raphael show us and display us a modernity that is a sort of prevision of what we will see in the future. Raphael died in Rome the 6th of April 1520, and his body was buried in one of the most important places of the city of Rome. In this case, we saw the artist painted by another French painter at the first part of the 19th century, and we choose this view of Raphael's death because near the baldachin we can see a sort of copy of the transfiguration that we have already saw. And this copy is posed here because when Raphael died, the masterpiece was posed upon his coffin. And after a funeral mass that was celebrated inside the Vatican Palace, the body of the master, as I was saying, was buried in a great temple of art, the Pantheon, a great temple of antiquity that is in downtown in Rome, and that is maybe one of the more interested architecture of the past that we conserve in downtown as heritage. In this temple, one of the scholars of Raffaello, Madonna Lorenzetto, realized for him a great statue that is called Madonna del Sasso, to protect the master for the next century. And this is the place where also today you can find scholars, visitors, students in front of the tomb of Raphael, just to say thanks to him for the work that he had done to transform the great part of our history of art. So we are arrived to the end, and so also I have to say thank you for your attention, and see you the next time to discover something else of our wonderful history of beauty. Thank you very much to all of you. Bye.